Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Oana Oprea. I'm a strategist and head of digital jam session agency, which is like the strategic partner of this event. So we are really honored to be here. I'm together with Stephanie Ferguson, who's the corporate vice president at Microsoft, with Helbo, who's the CMO at Denominator, and Frank Starling, who's the chief DI officer at Alliance, and with my colleague Valentin Suciu, who's also the co-founder and CCO at Jam Session Agency. Thank you for accepting this invitation, and we are happy to talk today about a few of our projects. We'll start with a problem. We often talk about gender equality in a male-dominated industry like STEM in a binary issue. It's men versus women. What we are trying to do today is asking, what if one of the most overlooked gaps is not between gender, but it is between generation? Men versus women, men versus men, and women versus women. So we thought that the younger generation entering the working fields, they have like different cultural nuances, problems, or maybe questions and struggles than women that had decades of experience. Sometimes this can create friction, and sometimes it can create silence. So we want to go and deep dive in both of these issues. With data, culture, and life experience in the room or in the terrace, our goal is to move beyond the performative solidarity and explore how we can build this intergenerational trust and inclusion among leadership. So let's get into it. I'm going to start with Emma. Your company turns diversity into a measurable asset. What does the number reveal about the intergenerational gap? And how might this be more dangerous than we realize?
Thank you for having me. And I work for Denominator, a global data provider of human capital and social data. So basically what we do is the title of this session. Like, we turn data into insight, and hopefully then our clients and partners turn those insight into action and make the change. But some of the insights that I can share from what we have seen, we do a lot of research as well, both independently but also with partners, is that there are major gaps there, and not only on gender, as you touch upon, but also the intersectionality between it. I just saw a campaign yesterday, maybe others have also seen it because it won a lion yesterday, from Elf Beauty. And the main title was "So Many Dicks, So Few of Others." And specifically, for example, Asian women. And that just touches upon the intersectionality. I'm an Asian woman myself. But when you look at me, you will see that. But actually, I have a Danish passport because I'm adopted by Danish parents. I'm originally from Vietnam. And this is just some of the complexities that you may not see from the outside. But when you actually look at the data then and structure it as we do, then you start to see the trends, and then you will realize how few, for example, Asian women that are there. So for us, it's really important to have the holistic perspective of it, not look at it as single things, but combining it in intersectionality, because with that, you will create some insights that you perhaps never thought about.
Sure, for sure. Especially in this type of conversation, that data is everything, because we have a lot of biases around the subject as well. I'll move to Stephanie. We talked a little bit before this session, and we know that you work at the intersection between technology and organizational leadership. Have you seen this generation gap happening in some of the situation, maybe corporate events or other contexts?
I absolutely have seen it, and it's interesting. I see it in STEM, of course, but I've seen this in the fashion industry. And I think the pattern is where women have had to work very, very hard older women today have had to work very hard through their careers to get where they've gotten, put their time in some industries, just, hit many, many barriers in others. they look at the new generation that comes in who feel like they want to do everything great right now, immediately. And you can have this kind of what I would call a misunderstanding, or a lack of understanding. I don't think that older women later in their careers wake up every day and say, gosh, those Gen Zers, I want them to put their time in and I don't want them to be successful. And I don't think that Gen Zers wake up every day saying, oh, those old ladies, they don't know anything. So I really do think this is about how do you get these generations connected in a good, structured way so that they can learn from each other and help each other.
Amazing, thank you. I'm curious from a cultural side, Frank, what do you think are the biases or the myths when it comes to women competing each other, and how the organization can design into this aspect?
Well, I'm always pulled back to a data point from Lean In, which is 2% of roles are negatively impacted by the decision to have a child, irrespective of gender. And there's often a bias around that, a bias within organizations which can stem to a limit of how accessible stretch projects may be if you're trying to get up the runway in your career, all the way through to how teams collaborate. So I think it's really important to check our biases, center inclusive leadership, understand what the very tangible barriers can be for some of our best people in the workplace. As a consultant, prior to my role at Lions, I was a consultant for about 4.5 years, and many of my consultants were parents. And the reason being is, firstly, it was an opportunity to work in a flexible way. But secondly, we didn't have a type of culture which restricted exactly how they worked. It allowed them to do what they needed to do in the time they needed to do it, and still be a very present, parent at the time, which I think which was amazing. I mean, I'm here at the festival, fortunate enough to bring my son here, who's 4 years old. He's at the creche right now. We've got a creche within the Palais. Last night he was at. I was speaking at a panel last night. He decided he wanted to come on stage with me for a very short period of time. Quite the experience for a 4-year-old, that's for sure. But I think, again, normalizing, for example, when we're talking about kids, I think that's really important. But de-stereotyping how we operate in the workplace and understanding that it might be a conversation that's not brought up. It doesn't mean that it's not a barrier and a bias that someone faces. And acknowledging that, I think, is a really great place to start. But taking action on that in terms of, well, how do you work on that yourself as a company is really important. For us, we've focused on psychological safety and inclusive leadership as a foundational pillar of our DEI strategy. And the purpose behind that is, how do we elevate the culture so we start to recognize that every single day you've got 180 cognitive biases that you're up against. How are you changing and battling those biases in order to make more inclusive decisions?
Yeah, I see that it's something that should come also organically from how each person is shaped inside the organization. More particular about the creative industries, we know that in creative agencies, and not only, they are often very progressive in terms of their messages. But when it comes to leadership, it's a bit more, let's say, conservative. How do you foster environments that leverage this more, let's say, intergenerational friendly connections and leadership models?
It's the general kind of gap. It is real inside my agency. I mean, I had a conversation with one. I said, "Do you know the names of all the juniors which are working for you?" And actually, did you have a real conversation with those guys? And I realized that I did not have with all of them. So actually, to put in place a way of working in which everybody feels like he's seen is something which we're working on. And it's really kind of important for us. Okay, we are a 70 people organization, so we are not that big. But when you're talking about Microsoft, it's a different kind of story. But relating to women in STEM and related with the theme of what we are doing right now. For us, I mean, if company were to have a gender, we are certainly more feminine. all the key jobs and about the leadership, all the key leadership jobs in my company are taken by women, and I'm actually the only man which is in a leadership position in my company. And this it came organically as we realized that actually women are more capable of nurturing collaboration and nurturing actually a real conversation. You can say that we are emotional sometimes, and it is a label which we put to women, but actually it's a lot more connection going on inside than in companies which are more kind of male skewed, which are very task-like driven, and they are very focused on that. But I think that communication and the result, we are the biggest and the most creative independent agency in Romania, battling with big networks. The result, it speaks for yourself that actually this kind of environment in which women actually are putting key points to collaborate, to put people together, brings results for a creative company. So it's for me actually we are kind of a feminine company, and I'm really glad that we are like this. It brings real results in terms of creativity and in terms of efficiency for our clients.
So more of a generational gap than a gender one.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Emma, about the performative way of women empowering each other. And if you can tell us what's the difference between this very performative allyship versus actual solution and support systems.
So to say, talking about like my own experiences and working at Denominator, for example. So the company was founded 4 years ago, and I was one of the 5 first employees. So saw the company grew from like a very small team into what we are today. And when I started as well, I was fairly young. I was still studying, and then the idea was always when I was then finished with my masters, then I would go full time, and that's what happened. But seeing that growth from being basically a student worker to today being the CMO of the company and being like in the leadership team, that's kind of like the way to show it and to show that you don't necessarily have to have a lot of seniority. You can be a woman and you can be fairly young, because if you can take on the responsibilities and if you show that you actually can manage the things that you're being tasked with, it will all come. And then another thing is also from an insights perspective is the panel before talked a bit about pay and paying creators, and I totally agree with that. And then from an organizational perspective, of course, that we pay employees in salary, maybe also get a bonus. And what's interesting is that some of the insights that the Denominator has seen is that for the FTSE 100, the salary pay gap is around 15% for men and women. But if you look at the bonus gap, it's 30%. So there's something away, yeah. So that's what the data can do. Like, you didn't know this, and why is it that in the salary there's only the 15 percentage difference, but then when you look at the bonus, it's actually 100% more. How is it that we generate the bonuses? What is it? Why is it that you get a bonus? And then another thing is that if you work in a company where it's possible, equity is then the next thing. Who do you give equity to? How much do they get? Do people get the same? Is some of those thoughts that the leaders can think about.
So you can see even database, like the generational gap is there, it's real, the gender and the generational one. I'm curious what triggers it. And Stephanie, I don't know, maybe do you think it's something that's due to the leadership models, due to, I don't know, scarcity of the role? What do you think that triggers this gap more?
So I'll go to some concrete examples because I think sometimes that can be helpful. And I'll do a not positive one and a positive one. So I actually, years ago, was asked by my colleague if I supported a promotion of a female on his team. And my initial reaction was, oh, okay, here are all the things she has to work on. Here's all the places she needs to get better. But I caught myself. And I thought, well, how many men are at the level that she would be promoted to who also have to work on all those things. I could name dozens. And I thought, you are being harsh, Stephanie, on your fellow females. And so I caught myself, and I really, really made it a point from that point forward to talk about that, because I think other women are doing it too, and to just always go through that myself. So that was me learning as a leader. And then just a completely flip example. Last year, my team was doing a global event tour, and they were like, Stephanie, you need to get out there and you need to post more on LinkedIn. And I'm like, ugh, I hate posting. I hate posting about myself. I hate pictures of myself. And so a young woman on my social team raised her hand and said, oh, I'll help you. I'll make this really easy for you. Let's sit down. Let's talk about you. And then what we'll do is we'll take pictures. I'll write up the posts. I'll clear them with you. And so the process of, over a year of her doing this with me, I got to know this young woman who probably is the same age as my kids. And I learned from her, and she also learned from me. And we struck up a real kind of friendship. And it was what many people call a reverse mentorship, but I just call it a great, relationship. And I think this is what helps the problem, which I told you about before, is, how do women, men, however you want to do it, but I think it's really a problem with women and women. How do they get paired up, get to know each other, and see what they can learn from each other? I can tell this woman the things she should or shouldn't be thinking about as she navigates her career at Microsoft. I know Microsoft deeply. She can tell me what's going on and what resonates with people her age. And that's just a fantastic partnership. So those are some thoughts.
Amazing. I surprised one insights, the fact that we are critical with other women, and maybe that's because we are critical with ourselves. So this could be one hypothesis. I'm curious from all of you, maybe we start with Frank, if you would implement one policy, one tool, one practice to break this generational wall, what it would be?
It's a great question. I think, again, I'm going to go back to psychological safety as one practice, because how would I define psychological safety? The ability to speak up, speak your truth, to challenge without that fear of being seen as ignorant or incompetent. Why that's so important across generations. With 5 generations in the workplace, we have a different set of cultures, we have a different set of communicating, we have a different way of collaborating. If we don't have psychological safety at the center of that, people aren't going to be their true selves in the room. They aren't going to challenge. Imagine a workplace where you still have a leader who's focused on command and control, who issues orders and expects people to follow. The challenge around that is, if I'm the only one in the room, if I'm the person who's underrepresented, will I feel comfortable to share my unique insight? Something's been presented to me, and I've got a different perspective on it. I've got a different tilt. But at that particular moment in time, that's when creativity and innovation happens, right? If there's psychological safety in the room, I will speak up. The leader will respond affirmatively and actually consider the point. If there isn't psychological safety, there's a high chance there's psychological danger. I won't say anything at all. I'll be silent. We'll continue as is. The danger around that is we create an echo chamber. So I think psychological safety is a tool for creating fearless teams, but it's also a tool for driving innovation and creativity, and that's proven on 25 years of research. Someone called Amy Edmondson, who coined the phrase psychological safety many years ago, who wrote the book, The Fearless Organization. So that would be, I think, my one thing, because I think it spans generations, but also has the ability to drive inclusion, growth, innovation, things that every business is fundamentally looking for.
Would you define, just a question for you, if you hear me? When you talk about psychological safety, it was this example of a collaboration between you and that woman from social media, in which actually the base of that It was that I want to learn from you, and you want to learn from me. And you're talking about this kind of when you have a leaderism which is like just command stuff. He's not interested to know anything. He's not interested to learn. He's not interested actually to have a. So the tool in that is actually, and that relates on what we are trying to do with Girl Talk and with the concept which we have, is actually to put together two people which have a big, maybe age difference or generation difference, but which are willing to learn from the other. So actually, it's this kind of curiosity that I am, I don't know, I'm a 50 years old, and I want to learn from a 20 years old. And I know that I have something to give to him, but I also genuinely want to learn something from him. I think that actually is a tool to create a safe medium, this type of curiosity, and actually, I just want to learn from you, man, and you from me. And this is actually the method to do it. And it was the method you actually had in your example to create this kind of connection and actually to learn from each other. And that's actually what Girl Talk, what Girl Talk it stands for. It's connecting two generation of women in order actually to allow the growth of both of them. So it's
Because I just wanted to comment on the reverse mentorship, because I think in general it's a great thing, but I actually did one myself for a CEO in Denmark who is from an NGO, and she's a bit over 30 years older than me. And we had a few and we had like really good connections. But what we actually realized from that reverse mentorship was that it wasn't the right fit, even though that she's like three decades older than me. We realized that we were thinking in a very similar way, and our personalities were very similar. And maybe also because even though I'm only 28 years old, I maybe advanced a bit more in my career than others at my age, then I couldn't really provide her with the insights that she actually wanted to. So just going back to that, we need the holistic view, because age is not the only thing. Like there's many characteristics that needs to be that fit for a reverse mentorship to be good.
And there the data comes.
I was going to say your point, just it's true for all mentorships, I think. And the worst thing is being paired up with a mentor, meeting the mentor and going, this just, I'm not feeling the energy. So I do think when things can happen, an environment can be set where things can happen a little bit more organically, that's key to actually having things be successful in a reverse or any mentorship situation.
So mentorship could be one of the tools that.
Oh yes, that's
and
okay.
also
So just also connecting another dot.
Yeah.
So I love that you turn data into insights, because I sit with lots of data and I look at that data, and that data is super important. But what I was saying earlier, as we were chatting, is that is a lagging indicator. So if I see that I'm losing women or any group of people in my organization, it's too late. So what you have to do in that situation is you have to say, what are the things you need to measure earlier in the process? And that's where I love, this whole conversation on, do you have things in place to enable psychological safety? Do you have these kinds of programs where you're measuring activity at that point, but that's okay, because that's how you're going to get to the outcomes. If you wait and look at the outcomes, it's too late.
I think, I totally agree, and I think there isn't I think when we talk about psychological safety, there isn't a summit that we're trying to get to. It is very much about constantly managing how psychologically safe is our environment. And I love that point on mentorship, because I think that's really important as well. When we do implement initiatives in the workplace, or we are backing initiatives to drive that sense of inclusion, is it working? Are people able to cross either generational gaps or cultural barriers to understand and to work with each other? And I think that's a really key point in terms of just how that all works. So, and then even the point of curiosity is almost kind of the center of inclusive leadership, right? If we are curious and we genuinely care about what people have to say, there's such a huge benefit to that. So.
I love how this panel is so complete, because we have also the full solution, like be proactive, be creative and organic about the needs of the team, but also measure the impact. So I think it's really powerful. And what I would also, I don't make a note about it, is that what I think is that this generation gap, it's not coming from a bad intent. Maybe it's just from silence and from the fact that we are not that open, maybe, to the generation that aren't in your in our box. So for me, this is like the main takeaway. So thank you everyone for joining this panel. And we are excited to work more about these issues. Thank you.